Let's get ready to rumble!
Yes, Boxingites, the weekly boxing news review is back. So we go straight into it. The editor's letter from Chris Dixon. He says the Americans just don't get it. He's referring to the treatment from the American media, who doubt the credibilities of Darren Barker and Matthew Macklin as challengers for Sergio Martinez's WBC title, or what may be not a title anymore. And while Dixon does not subscribe to the school of thought that Martinez is a brilliant middleweight and believes his pound-for-pound ranking flatters him, he does say Martinez is the best in the division. He goes on to say Macklin and Barker were not sacrificial lambs. He also says Martinez has hit his peak at age 37 and is looking to cash in. Dixon also questions why Martinez would feel the need to parade the green WBC belt over his shoulder, as he did last Saturday. Why he did that, I don't know. And to think now he wants to fight Chavez, thus paying the WBC more sanctioning fees for the privilege. Dixon feels Martinez should give the WBC and Jose Sulaiman the finger for allowing Chavez Jr. to fight Sebastian Sabek for the dubious, to say the least, WBC silver belt, and now he's been upgraded to the diamond belt and has no interest and is being put under no pressure by the WBC to defend against Martinez, who shouldn't have lost his belt in the first place, as he won his titles in the ring and he is the linear champion, beating Pavlik, Pavlik beat Taylor, Taylor beat Hopkins, and such and such. The whole situation is a farce. This isn't me reading from the magazine right now. This is me just speaking my mind. Chavez Jr. was about to defend against Martin Murray, who acquitted himself well against Felix Sturm, but the fight has been cancelled due to Murray having visa problems, having served jail time before he turned his life around. Lou DiBella is talking about he's prepared to let Sergio fight Floyd Mayweather at 154 pounds, saying he would move even down to 150 pounds to make the fight and give Mayweather 80% of the money. Dixon also wonders what HBO are going to do with Martinez, as Chavez is not likely to go anywhere near him. Dixon seems to be indicating that Chavez is more than likely going to be defending against the likes of Kerry Hope, Murray, and Macklin. And that's a scary thought in my opinion, because these guys haven't really beat no names on a world level. Let's face it, they're domestic British level fighters, and they should be fighting each other. They have the European belt at stake, they have the Commonwealth and the British belts and such to fight with. Throw Barker into that mix too. And that's what should be happening. You know? The guest columnist this week is Carl Froch, talking about he's ready for May the 26th, where he tackles Lucien Boutte in Nottingham. And in my opinion, that fight's going to come down to who adapts the better inside game, because they both like to fight on the end of the jab if they can. And Froch has a really good chance of winning this, in my opinion. In my opinion. And then we have the panel. This week we have Gary Lockett, former middleweight who challenged Kelly Pavlik for his world title. Michael Jennings, a former Kell Brook opponent. Anthony Farnell, an ex-middleweight contender. And Junior Witter, former WBC light welterweight champion. And the first question they're being asked is, who is the best middleweight in Britain? Gary Lockett says Macklin has a high work rate. Barker seems to be a better thinking boxer. Murray seems to be the strongest, and he can't call it. Michael Jennings goes for Martin Murray. He says he's come on a real long way and he's the most effective. Anthony Farnell says Darren Barker. Junior Witter says it's between Martin Murray and Barker. The other question is, who would win a fight out of Kell Brook and Amir Khan? Now, Jennings, Lockett and Farnell have all went for Khan, saying he's too fit, too experienced, and etc., etc. Junior Witter, however, says Khan is not big enough to fight Kell. He's quick and can stick to a game plan, but Brook can track people down and he's a decent puncher. Now we have the Your Say page, which is boxing tweets and the letters. I'm going to start with the boxing tweets, and I'm just going to tweet the ones which stand out as such. At Matt Macklin, he says, I gave it my best but lost to the better man, disappointed, but he'll be back. At Amir King Khan asks, why does Kell Brook call me out? He needs to step up his game if he wants a payday against me. At least fight someone who is in the top 50. Khan doesn't believe that Brook warrants a fight against him. At Danny Swift, about to turn my dreams into reality. Danny Garcia believes he can conquer the legendary Erik Morales on Saturday. Now let's start with the letters. We're going to start with the letter of the week. One Shot Isn't Enough is a letter titled by Lee Walker. Why must the likes of Darren Barker, Matthew Macklin, Martin Murray and Randall Monroe and Kevin Mitchell have to work all their careers for one shot at a world title, while other pros from other countries, after several quick wins over mediocre opposition, are allowed to defend against unworthy challengers? Chavez, Tavoris Cloud and K9 Bundry spring to mind. David Gibbs has a letter titled, Why Not Evander? And he's basically saying after Jean-Marc Mormec got destroyed by Vlad so easily, why shouldn't the real deal get a shot? Now we go into the reader's poll, which is at www.boxingnewsonline.net. The poll is asking who would win out of Amir Khan and Kell Brook. Surprisingly, 57% of the vote has gone to Kell Brook to win. And on facebook.com/boxingnewsonline, Gavin Barry says Kell is one of the best prospects we have. He will be much better than Khan eventually, but he's not quite ready. Tom Breeden says Brook has no chance of outboxing Khan from range, and he doesn't fight inside, therefore has no way of winning. But it would be a competitive bout, but not all that close. Ryan Lansley says Khan is too fast, a whole level above Brook. He says Brook is good, but Khan is world class. Jamie Savin says Brook's ring IQ is too much for Khan's. Brook would be able to adjust to Khan's hand speed, and after a couple of rounds, he'd be able to counter Khan all day. Now we have the 10 count. This week they're covering Welsh men on tour. These fighting men from the Principality made their mark outside the UK, asserts Mark Christie. At number 1, we have Jim Driscoll. The Cardiff legend won a 10-round non-title newspaper decision over world featherweight champion Abe Attell in 1909. But Peerless Jim could not secure a rematch, and universal recognition as king escaped him. Number 2, Joe Calzaghe. Joe was criticized by his rivals in America for failing to venture overseas. 2 of these critics were hypocrites who never defended their world titles on away ground, Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. Joe beat them both on American soil. Number 3, Colin Jones. After beating Hans-Henrik Palm in a Denmark 1982 European welterweight fight, Jones ventured to Nevada for 2 shots at world glory. He deserved more than a draw and the loss he received for his efforts. I believe they're talking about the 2 bouts against Milton McCrory. Number 4, Enzo Macronelli. Enzo's roller coaster career hurtled skywards when he emphatically blasted out Alexander Kotelbey in a round to claim the European Cruiserweight title during a 2010 stay in St. Petersburg, Russia. Number 5, Frank Moody. Like Freddie Welch, who is not on the list, Moody pursued his whole career in America. Moody produced his best boxing across the pond. But his losses over there are perhaps the most notable, losing to the likes of Harry Greb, Tiger Flowers, and Maxie Rosenblum, who held the distinction of being called Slapsy Maxie because he couldn't punch his way out of a wet paper bag. And now we have the hit and miss section. We have Kerry Hope, the Welsh man who won the European middleweight title by beating Gregorius Proska. Number 2, Kell Brook, who defeated Matthew Hatton. Number 3, Matthew Macklin for going 11 rounds against Sergio Martinez. And number 4, we have Kendall Holt, who crushed Tim Coleman in 2 rounds to move himself back into the world rankings at light welterweight. And in the miss section, we have Danny Williams, who was apparently retired, but he seems to be prepping himself to fight Zoltan Petronil in Budapest for the UBO Euro title. Number 3, David Fields. This referee allowed Jason Petaway to be beaten to a pulp against Magomed Abdusalamov on the New York bill. Derek Chisora had his license withdrawn indefinitely by the British Boxing Board of Control, meaning he will have to travel to fight on or win an appeal. And at number 5, we have Martin Murray, whose proposed challenge for Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.'s middleweight title, if you can call it that, was scuppered by visa problems. In the news section, we have Lucien Boutte saying it's about time that he fought away from home. He cites Joe Calzaghe as an example of how when Joe fought in America and beat Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr., how them two bouts gave him much acclaim and respect, and such and such. Eric Ochieng from Hackney defends his English light middleweight title on the bill. Denton Vassell and Lee Purdy have a rematch. I wonder what was the result of the first match. I'll have to look that up. I'm not even too sure on that one. And somebody named Pierre Oliver Cote defends his IBF Intercontinental light welterweight champion on the bill too. Jermaine Taylor, his second comeback bout, is on April the 20th in Mississippi. On the same bill is Erislandy Lara and former world title challenger Ronald Hearns. See, this is the problem with boxing, you know what I mean? Ronald Hearns, come on, man. I know Tommy's your dad and shit, but you can't fight. You can't fight. I mean, Lara and Taylor should be the fight, really, shouldn't it? I don't understand, man. I don't understand. Victor Ortiz completed the Los Angeles Marathon on Sunday, March the 18th, in a personal best time of 3 hours and 27 minutes, just 3 months before he meets Andre Berto in their rematch. Herman Marquez defends his WBA World Flyweight strap against former WBC Light Fly King Rodel Mayor on Saturday, March the 24th in Sonora, Mexico. Kell Brook is back in action in his hometown on Sheffield on July the 7th, with promoter Eddie Hearn hoping to deliver his man an IBF welterweight title shot in September or October. And in the news in brief, national newspapers have reported that a threat was made to kill British and Commonwealth super middleweight champion George Groves, who last week withdrew from defending against Scotland's Kenny Anderson at Wembley Arena due to a back complaint. A spokesman for the Metropolitan Police said a threat to the welfare of a man in his 20s was made to the police in Hounslow. Suspicion has been cast on Manuel Jimenez after his first round knockout loss to Roman Gonzalez in the Palenque de Gallos in Mexico on March the 17th. Jimenez, 7 stone in 11 and a quarter pound, and now 11 wins, 3 losses and 1 draw, went down from a body shot and declined to beat referee Alvaro Garcia's count. His purse for the non-title 10-rounder has been withheld. WBA light flyweight champion Gonzalez, 7 stone in 11 pounds, is now 31-0 with 26 KOs. James DeGale is to defend his European super middleweight title in Denmark on April the 21st against Christian Sanavia. DeGale had a great amateur career, but he has never been in the ring with someone of my experience, said Sanavia. This is my last chance to get back to where I belong, which is at the very top of the super middleweight division. John Murray has been enjoying his time out since bruising defeats last year to Brandon Rios and Kevin Mitchell. He says since he gave Mitchell an opportunity to fight for his titles, Mitchell should grant him the same courtesy in return. Now, I don't want to do no scaremongering, but did anyone see John Murray's face after he fought Brandon Rios? Did anyone see the amount of punches that Kevin Mitchell hit that guy with in the late stages of the fight before he got stopped? Somebody needs to be keeping a close eye on John Murray. Let me say that now. He fights with his face, and there's no other way to describe it. And at world level, or even at European level, it's not going to do him no good, man. No good. Arthur Abrahams is back in action against Peter Rolcheski in Kiel, Germany on May the 5th. Sky Sports received their highest viewing figures for a non-pay-per-view boxing event last week, with the War of the Roses show headlined by Kell Brook and Matthew Hatton. They peaked at 444,000, but the official figure could be higher. Open verdict on Sutherland death. The inquest into the death of Darren Sutherland, the Olympic boxer who hung himself in 2009, returned an open verdict at Croydon's Coroner's Court only last week. The coroner said to record a verdict of suicide had to be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that the individual acted unaided and also was fully aware that he intended to end his life. Sutherland, who won a bronze medal at the Beijing Games, moved to London, where he turned professional. His family solicitor insisted that Sutherland found the transition from amateur boxing difficult. Sutherland's management team were criticized during the course of the inquest. I thought this was a fact-finding mission to find out why, said his promoter, Frank Maloney. I was very surprised at their approach and how they was attacking the boxing team. I don't blame the sport for what happened to Darren, the sport I'll always love. But what I don't like is the impression that people try to paint promoters and managers in boxing like we're all some kind of characters, that we're all shady characters who think of money only. I think I acted beyond the call of duty of any manager or promoter to a fighter with Darren Sutherland. Maloney pointed out media stories in 2009 that revealed Darren was conflicted about continuing in the sport. I gave him a way out by saying, "You don't have to box. Let the lawyers negotiate you out of your contract," Frank said. A man's died, and instead of trying to find out the reason why, they're trying to blame professional boxing. And they are so wrong to blame professional boxing. Maloney discovered Sutherland's body and was treated for a heart attack soon afterwards. James Evans, the Sutherland's family solicitor, said in a statement, "Darren's death was indeed tragic for the family. It was indeed tragic for the whole of Ireland and the boxing world. The family lost a son, a brother, who was so full of life, who had been described by witnesses as a gentleman, well-mannered, intelligent, sensitive. He was an ambassador for good and for Ireland. He was an Olympian and a young man whose future would have been, as Darren said himself, so bright." R.I.P. Now, if you go on boxingnewsonline.net, you will find blogs, videos, reviews, and features like the astounding one with Mick Hennessy, who is Tyson Fury's manager. Sounds like Mick is drinking the Hennessy. Mick's talking about why David Price needs Tyson Fury more than Fury needs the big Liverpudlian. It's a joke. Then we have the Adrian Broner hater, Jack Hirsch. Jack Hirsch continues going through his list of classic matchups, including Marciano versus Holyfield, and this one's a really good one, Roberto Duran versus Pernell Whitaker. Nkosinathi Joyi, the South African strawweight title holder, will defend against Katsunari Takayama in a return bout at the Orient Theatre, East London, South Africa, on March the 30th. The IBF title is on the line. Former WBO bantamweight champion Robbie Regan had a tribute night at the Merthyr Labour Club in Wales, watching old fight highlights of his with fans and fighters of today and the past. Juan Manuel Marquez has a new opponent for his April the 14th date in Mexico City after Cesar Kowenka dropped out. In comes the Ukraine's Sergei Fedchenko. They meet for the vacant interim WBO light welterweight title, which gives Marcus the chance to win a world title at a fourth weight, previously holding titles at feather, super feather, and lightweight. The fight at the new Arena Mexico forms part of a split-site HBO pay-per-view show with Brandon Rios and Richard Abril fighting at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. Rios Abril is for the vacant WBA lightweight belt, with Abril replacing fellow Cuban Yorcalis Gamboa, who pulled out in a bid to move from Top Rank to the Floyd Mayweather camp. Top Rank are suing Gamboa, who they claim had signed to fight Rios. Norway's Cecilia Brakus and France's Anne-Sophie Mathis were supposed to meet on the 17th of March. This bout has been postponed till the 21st of April. Brakus went down with flu. Now the Norwegian has had her tonsils removed, so the match has been scrapped. This apparently is the biggest fight in women's boxing right now. Brakus is 19-0 with 5 KOs and holds the WBA, WBC, and WBO female welterweight belts. Mathis is 26-1, 22 stoppages, and holds the IBA crown. The British Boxing Board of Control have announced a whole load of British title fights and a few eliminators. So Hatton Promotions will be staging Scott Quigg and Rendell Monroe. The date and venue still to be decided. David Price fights Sam Sexton at the Aintree Equestrian Centre in Liverpool. Ashley Theophane defends his 10-stone belt against Steve Williams, while there's an eliminator for that title that sees Adil Anwar take on Lenny Dawes. Also, Bob Ajisaf defends his English light heavy belt against Travis Dickinson. Travis's brother, John Lewis Dickinson, meets Matty Askin in an eliminator for the British Cruiserweight title at the Oldham Leisure Centre on April the 21st. This contest is also for the English title, which is vacant. And on the same bill, we see Anthony Crolla defend his British lightweight title against Derry Matthews. Tomorrow sees Gary Buckland and Paul Truscott contesting the vacant British Super Featherweight Championship. The winner meets Stephen Foster Jr. Curtis Woodhouse, who is an ex-professional footballer, faces Del Miles in a British light welterweight title eliminator. Promoter Dave Caldwell, who promotes the bout, also promotes a show at the Echo Arena in Liverpool, in which Tony Bellew defends his British light heavyweight title against Danny McIntosh. On the 31st of March, we see Brian Rose defend his 11-stone crown against Max Maxwell. Another eliminator for this title pits Sam Webb against Matthew Hall. George Groves and Kenny Anderson, that bout has been cancelled, as I mentioned earlier, with the CID investigating a death threat towards George Groves. And the last title bout is Colin Lyons versus Junior Witter. Frank Warren is still contesting Derek Chisora's suspension, citing that Mark Kaler and Errol Christie brawled before a fight. So did Herbie Hyde and others. He also complains about the chairman of the board, Charles Giles, who didn't even submit a written report on the incident. He was in the building during the Hay-Chisora confrontation, but has not made himself available for comment, and that's wrong. Warren says that Giles should be looking out for the best interests of the British license holder. Warren also alleges that Giles' expenses were paid by the WBC, of which Giles is the vice chairman. He also questioned who was there to represent the license holders, if that was the case. When asked about the next move for the controversial heavyweight Chisora, Warren announced that he and his team will appeal the decision. Now we go to fight action and fight previews. They start with Matthew Macklin versus Sergio Martinez. Now, I'm assuming, as we're all boxing fans, we've all seen the fight, so a blow-for-blow analysis will be a bit of a waste of time, and I'm going to shorten the video. I just wanted to add, what I thought is bringing Buddy McGirt in just before your biggest fight ever. I don't know, man. I just think it will just leave him in two minds whether he's supposed to slug or box. I've been watching Macklin since 2005 and 2006, you know, and he's never tried to give off the pretension that he's a boxer. He's always been a two-handed slugger. You know, that's what he's always been. So how much time McGirt got to modify his style, I don't know. It just seemed like a strange situation, and he did pretty well at it. But what I found is when he was standing off and he was just a sitting duck for the straight left, you know. There's a difference between standing off for a breather and standing off to set yourself for your next attack. It's two different things, and if you're morphing from slugger to boxer, you need a lot of time to adjust to the distances, you know what I mean, in my opinion. One of Matthew's big concerns in his camp's concerns could have been Matthew's punch output, because if you watch the fight against Sturm, you watch the fights against Jamie Moore, and most of his fights, he throws so many punches. They were probably thinking to throw so much volume at a good counter-puncher like Martinez could be detrimental, and they're worrying about his stamina and such. So bringing in McGirt could conserve his punch output and help him in the fight. But to me, it's just too quick a change. I think Matthew would have been better off staying in close when he could and not letting Martinez get the full length on that straight left. That might have been the best tactic. Who knows? You see, the thing with Macklin and Wanma is when they first started as pros and you get the tomato cans, what you're supposed to blow away easy, you shouldn't always just blow them away easy, you know? Your coaches should be implementing stuff in your training which you can work out in them fights where the threat is minimal. You're fighting a lot of guys who can't punch, they're not very fast, they're there for you to pad up your records and get used to the pro game and get used to the pace of professional fighting. That is when you should be working on the more technical aspects of your game, you know? Not when you're in world title fights, man, that's crazy, you know? But we can discuss tactics like that on another video at another time, I guess. The funny thing about this fight as well was the female judge, Julie Lederman, had the fight level when it was stopped, 103-103. Now, I'm not going to turn it into a sexist sort of war or a sexist rant, because there's been enough male judges who you would have sworn was Mr. Magoo judging fights, so let's not even go there. One fight on the undercard what I really enjoyed was Edwin La Bomba Clark Rodriguez and Don the Bomb George, an explosive encounter. A very good fight. And La Bomba Rodriguez, he was good, man. Nice jab, straight right, shoulder rolls and all that, confident boxing. And he basically just frustrated George. We'll have to see if George can come back, you know. Rodriguez goes to 21-0, 14 stoppages. And it will be interesting to see where he can go from here and take his career. Now, this bout that I'm about to review was on the miss section of the hit and miss section that I covered earlier. And that was because of the referee's apparently poor performance. But I didn't see it, so let me just read it out. Midway through the second round of this encounter with Magomed Abdul Salamov, who from now I'm going to call Abdul because, yo, I'm not down with the tongue twisting shit right now, between Abdul and Virginia's Jason Petway. Petway apparently laughed after being clouted in the face. He thought he felt Abdul's power and that he could take it. But he hadn't felt anything yet. After a decent opener, landing through the middle, Petway merrily fired back when he was tagged in the next. Abdul Salamov, I said I was just going to call him Abdul, was in complete control by the third with 20 seconds left in the round. The favorite landed a crunching right to send Petway tottering back. Suddenly, Petway was lost. A violent four-punch combination rattled off Petway's face. What had started as an interesting match between two unbeaten fighters had become a horrible mismatch. Petway, blood leaking from his nose and his face painted red, stumbled to the floor. That should have signaled the end. and referee David Fields should not have allowed Jason to continue. With Petaway being beaten to a pulp, the ringside doctor signaled to the referee that enough was enough. At 1 minute 20 of round 4, Abdul Salamov was very impressive, and he moves to 14-0 with 14 stoppages. Well, it seems like Boxing News have lumped all the blame onto the referee, but what about Petaway's corner? Shouldn't they have had a hand in stopping it earlier, maybe? On the bill also was Kevin Rooney Jr., who is Kevin Rooney's son, Kevin Rooney being Tyson's old coach, who used to shout the numbers at Tyson, and Tyson used to rattle off the combinations, the good old days. He scored a first-round knockout on the bill. He knocked out Anthony Schuff in 72 seconds. In the United Kingdom, in Sheffield, Kell Brook outclassed Matthew Hatton. At stake was Brook's WBA Intercontinental title and Hatton's IBF International belt. Brook outclassed Hatton for the most of the bout and broke his nose. Irish middleweight Kerry Hope scored an upset win to take the European middleweight title against Grzegorz Proska. Carl Frampton was fed an easy touch in Prosper Ankara and defended his Commonwealth title in 2 rounds at the super bantamweight limit. In Carbison, California, the Boxing News tells Tim Coleman that the more you talk, the more people will expect from you, as he gets knocked out in 2 rounds by Kendall Holt. In St. Charles, Missouri, the grandson of former heavyweight champion Leon Spinks, Leon third generation Spinks, KO'd Casey Crane in 101 seconds. And he went on to say that he's very excited to be a pro. Spinks fights as a light welterweight. In Los Mochis, Mexico, WBC lightweight champion Antonio DeMarco retained his crown against Miguel Roman. It took DeMarco 5 one-sided rounds to raise his record to 26-2, 20 KOs. He closed the show with 2 right uppercuts and a hook. Roman is now left with a record of 37 wins and 10 losses, 28 inside the distance. The Boxing News are tipping Eric Morales to retain his WBC light welterweight crown against Danny Garcia. The Boxing News believe this opportunity has come a little too early for Garcia. But you never know. You know what I mean? Morales is 35 now and he's survived many wars. 59 fights now. You know, he could fall apart by the seams tomorrow. You never know. You never know what could happen. James Kirkland fights Carlos Molina in what appears to be a non-title bout. If he wins this one, he goes on to fight Vanes Martirosyan in a final eliminator. And theoretically, that should get him a shot at Saul Alvarez's WBC title. But I don't see Alvarez defending against Kirkland, really. These Mexican dudes seem to have a little stranglehold on the WBC powers to be. Ducking and diving, shucking and jiving, you know what I mean? Not fighting the top contenders and all that shit. Let's see how it goes though. The Boxing News tipped Kirkland to win a very tight decision. British and European lightweight champion Gavin Rees defends the European title tomorrow against Anthony Mazzarchi. And the Boxing News tipped Gavin to win a lopsided 12-round points decision. Gavin is also a former WBA title belt holder at the light welterweight limit, which he won by outpointing Solomon Umbaye in 2007, and then he got stopped by Andrei Kotelnik the following year. Shane McPhilbin defends his British cruiserweight crown against former WBO king Enzo Maccarinelli. Maccarinelli is the Boxing News favorite to win by a stoppage in 6 rounds. But yo, man, I've seen Enzo get KO'd violently at least 3 or 4 times in the last 4 or 5 years. So who knows what can happen there? Who knows? In the Aviator Sports Complex in Brooklyn, there's a card which has got a lot of old faces and guys who maybe shouldn't still be in the ring. This is me speaking, not the Boxing News. We have Zab Judah, 41 wins, 7 losses. He fights Vernon Paris tomorrow. Paris, who calls himself the Iceman, is 10 years younger than Judah. But this IBF light welterweight eliminator is by far the toughest assignment of his career. 2 heavyweight bouts feature on the undercard, Serhij Lajkovic meeting Bryant Jennings, and Thomas Adamek facing Nagy Aguilera. Also, we have Victor Manuel Caio fighting Nate Campbell. Also on Saturday, at the Carnival City Casino in South Africa, we have Takalani Enlove against Jeffrey Mafabula. The Boxing News predict it to be a very exciting fight. They don't predict a winner, and I don't know enough about either fighter to pick one either. Now, before I carry on, I just want to say, when I say these guys are old fighters and they shouldn't be in the ring, take that with a pinch of salt. I'm a libertarian. I think if you want to box to your 50, 60, it's up to you. You know what I'm saying? I would just like sort of talking in a generality, if you like. So let's carry on. We go to the flashback. This week in 1976. On an emotional night at Wembley, John H. Stracey hammered Hedgeman Lewis into a 10th round stoppage defeat. He retained his WBC welterweight title. Our page-free headline summed it all up. Stracey's confidence was so high, he fought with total self-belief. Graham Houston, who was the editor at the time, said his sheer persistency and desire for victory was way too much for Lewis to cope with. This turned out to be Stracey's first and only successful defense of the title that he had won from Jose Napoles. The other feature in flashback this week in 1976 went like this. We think of Marvin Hagler as a fearsome fighting machine, but even he had his off nights. One such came at the Philadelphia Spectrum, where Willie the Worm Monroe decisively outpointed him over 10 hard rounds. Nigel Collins reported from the ringside. Hagler was game to the end, but he was outfought at practically every turn. Marvin didn't get into the fight until round 5, where the fighters exchanged good shots. There was even one point where Monroe blasted Hagler's mouthpiece into the press row. It ricocheted off our correspondent's arm and disappeared under the ring. However, Hagler did avenge that loss to Monroe by a second round KO, which I saw on KO TV last year, I do believe. And let's face it, if Willie Monroe or Benny Briscoe, if them guys were fighting today with the proliferation of belts about, it's kind of hard to picture them not picking up a couple of belts and defending it multiple times, you know what I mean? Martinez would really be taking a risk to be fighting with his hands down against them guys. And Chavez Jr., if he was going to try and do pressure fighting against them two, he'd be picking up some blows, man. Whether he'd get knocked out or not, I don't know. He'd need to have a chin like his father to have any chance of surviving a match like that. And both Martinez and Chavez would be struggling to probably even get in a top 10 when Carlos Monzo was champion. But that's just my opinion. That's just me speculating. And with that, I'm going to say this is Boxing Beats and Rhymes. It's been a pleasure. Peace out.